Most people who walk past the old gas station on Route 9 never notice the boy sitting on the curb every afternoon at exactly 3:15, carefully unwrapping a packed lunch and handing it to the weathered man who slept beneath the overpass. But Garrett Brennan, the bikers called him Flint. He noticed everything, especially when something didn't add up. And what he was about to discover would shake him harder than 30 years of riding with the Iron Reapers ever had. The morning Ezra Cordell Hayes woke up, his mother was already in the kitchen. 6:30 on a Tuesday, the kind of early that still felt like night, when the world outside their small rental house was more shadow than light. Sienna Hayes moved through the cramped space with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to do three things at once, her hands never still, as she made her son's lunch with the same careful attention she gave everything else in her life. Brown paper bag. Always brown paper, never plastic, because she believed it kept the sandwich from getting soggy during the long school day. She spread peanut butter across wheat bread, added strawberry jam from the discount store, cut an apple into quarters, wrapped them in wax paper. A juice box, the kind with the bendy straw still attached. She folded the top of the bag twice, creased it with her palm, wrote his name in blue pen across the front. Ezra. Not Ez, not Buddy, not Sweetheart. His full name, because even in something as simple as a lunch bag, she wanted him to know he mattered. Ezra watched from the doorway, 10 years old and small for his age, wearing jeans that hung loose on his hips and a jacket his mother had bought 2 sizes too big so he could grow into it. He was supposed to be getting ready for school, brushing his teeth, combing his hair, but he always stopped here first. Watching her pack his lunch had become a ritual, though he never told her why. Never told her that this moment, this quiet act of love in a kitchen that smelled like burnt coffee and dish soap, was sometimes the only thing that got him through the day. She looked up and caught him staring. Her face softened, tired eyes crinkling at the corners. 32 years old, and already she looked older, the kind of aging that came from working 2 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night and carrying a weight that had nothing to do with pounds. "Morning, baby," she said, her voice rough from exhaustion. "You sleep okay?" He nodded, lied. He'd been awake since 5, listening to her move around the house, waiting for the sound of her car pulling out of the driveway for her first shift at the diner. But he smiled anyway, because that's what she needed. A smile. Proof that he was fine, that she was doing enough, that the world hadn't broken him yet. She handed him the lunch bag. "Made your favorite. Don't forget to eat it all, okay? You're getting too skinny." He took the bag, felt its weight in his hands. The sandwich still warm from being made. The apple heavy and solid. The juice box cold from the refrigerator. Everything she could give him folded into brown paper. "I will, Mom. Promise." Another lie. But this one tasted different. This one stuck in his throat like something sharp. The school bus dropped Ezra off at Route 9 at 3:13 every afternoon. 2 minutes early, which meant he had to wait. He sat on the concrete curb near the air pump at Miller's Gas and Go, a lonely outpost that sat between farmland and forest, where the only sound was wind moving through tall grass and the occasional rumble of a passing truck. The place smelled like burnt coffee and motor oil, its single pump creaking slightly in the breeze, while faded advertisements peeled from the windows. At 3:15 exactly, Walter Calhoun appeared from beneath the overpass. Walt was 62 years old, though he looked closer to 80. His clothes were layers of worn flannel and stained canvas. His face weathered like old leather left too long in the sun. His hands trembled when he walked, not from cold, but from something deeper, something that lived in his bones. He moved slowly, carefully, like a man who'd learned that the world had edges, and if you weren't careful, you'd fall right off. He never said much, just nodded when he saw Ezra, lowered himself against the gas station wall with a soft grunt, and waited. Ezra opened the paper sack, removed the sandwich wrapped in wax paper, the apple quarters, the juice box with its bendy straw. He placed them gently on the concrete between them, his small hands moving with a precision that seemed practiced. Rehearsed, like a ritual performed so many times it had become muscle memory. Walt accepted the food with another nod. No words exchanged, no drama, just a simple transaction that felt ancient and holy and utterly necessary. Ezra watched him eat, watched the way Walt took small bites, chewing slowly, savoring each mouthful, like it might be the last meal he'd ever see. Which Ezra suspected, without this daily offering, it very well could be. The old man's hands shook less when he had food in them, his eyes, usually distant and haunted, focused on something real. When Walt finished, he folded the wax paper carefully, tucked it into his pocket, crushed the empty juice box and set it aside, looked at Ezra with eyes that held more gratitude than any words could carry. "Thank you, son." 2 words, the only 2 Walt ever said, but they meant everything. Ezra stood, folded the empty bag, and walked toward the road where the school bus stop sign leaned slightly to one side. He didn't look back. If he looked back, he'd see Walt's face, and if he saw Walt's face, he might start crying, and if he started crying, he might not be able to stop. He walked the mile home on an empty stomach, his footsteps echoing on the gravel road, his jacket pulled tight against the afternoon chill. By the time he reached the small rental house with its peeling paint and sagging porch, it was almost 4 o'clock. His mother wouldn't be home until 11:30 after her second shift cleaning office buildings downtown. The house was empty and quiet and cold. Ezra dropped his backpack by the door, went to the kitchen, opened the cabinet above the refrigerator, found the cereal box nearly empty, tipped it into a bowl. Maybe a quarter cup of generic cornflakes, no milk because they'd run out yesterday. He ate them dry, one piece at a time, making them last, making each flake count. His stomach cramped with hunger, but he ignored it. This was normal now. This was just how things were. He'd gotten good at ignoring things. The hollow feeling in his belly, the way his jeans kept slipping down, even with a belt, the way his vision sometimes went fuzzy around the edges during afternoon classes. He sat at the kitchen table and pulled out his homework. Math problems that blurred together, reading comprehension questions about characters in books who always seemed to have enough to eat. He worked slowly, carefully, trying to focus past the hunger, past the exhaustion, past the weight of carrying a secret he knew would break his mother's heart if she ever found out. 10 weeks ago, he'd been walking home from the bus stop when he first saw Walt. The old man had been curled up beneath the overpass, shaking so hard, Ezra thought he was having a seizure. He'd stopped to ask if Walt was okay, received no answer. Just hollow eyes staring at nothing. The next day, Ezra had brought his lunch, handed it over without thinking, without planning, just an instinct that felt right. Walt had stared at the sandwich like it was something holy, eaten it with trembling hands, said thank you in a voice that cracked. Ezra had gone home hungry that day, and the next, and the next. But somewhere along the way, the hunger had stopped mattering. Because when he gave Walt that lunch, when he sat with him for those few minutes every afternoon, something shifted. The world felt less cruel, less empty, like maybe there was still something good left, something worth protecting. He never told his mother, never told anyone, because if he told them, they'd make him stop. They'd say he needed to eat, that he was just a kid, that it wasn't his responsibility. And maybe they'd be right, but right didn't matter when someone was starving. Right didn't matter when you were the only thing standing between another human being and the abyss. So Ezra kept his secret, carried it alone. And every afternoon at 3:15, he gave away the one thing he had left to give. Garrett Flint Brennan pulled his Harley into Miller's Gas and Go on a Tuesday afternoon, bone-tired and soul-weary from a memorial service 3 counties over. They'd buried Tommy Smokey Davis that morning, a brother who'd gone down on a slick highway curve doing 90 in the rain. 43 years old, dead before the ambulance arrived. The service had been the kind of grim affair bikers knew too well, leather and chrome and grief that sat heavy in the chest like stones. Flint was 48, 6'4", with shoulders that seemed too wide for doorways and a thick beard streaked with gray that made him look older than his years. The leather vest bearing his Iron Reapers patch creaked as he dismounted, his body aching from 8 hours on the road. He needed something cold to drink, needed to stretch his legs, needed to be anywhere but inside his own head for a few minutes. The gas station was nearly deserted. Just one clerk visible through the window, an older woman organizing lottery tickets with the slow precision of someone trying to look busy. She glanced up when Flint's bike rumbled into the lot, her expression shifting from curiosity to wariness to forced neutrality. He was used to that look, had been getting it for 30 years. He was heading toward the entrance when he saw them. A boy, maybe 10 years old, sitting on the concrete curb near the air pump. Small for his age, wearing clothes that looked a size too big. Dark hair that needed cutting. Sneakers scuffed nearly white. And beside him, leaning against the station wall, a homeless man who looked to be in his 60s. Layers of worn clothing. Face like weathered leather. Hands that trembled even at rest. Flint paused near his bike, one hand still on the handlebar watching. The boy opened a crumpled sack with careful deliberation, removed a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, apple quarters, a juice box, placed them gently beside the homeless man who accepted them with a quiet nod. No words exchanged, no performance, just a simple transaction that felt practiced routine like it had happened in many times before. Then the boy stood, folded the empty bag, and walked toward the road. Something about the scene caught in Flint's chest, held there. He couldn't have said why exactly. Maybe it was the boy's size, how small he looked against the vast emptiness of Route 9. Maybe it was the careful way he'd handled the food like it was precious. Maybe it was the homeless man's face, the way gratitude and shame were in his expression. Or maybe it was something else, something older. A memory Flint kept buried so deep he usually forgot it was there. He watched the boy disappear around the bend, then turned to study the homeless man. The old guy was eating slowly, methodically, making each bite last. His hands had stopped shaking. For just a few minutes, he looked almost peaceful. Flint went inside, bought a coffee he didn't want, and stood by the window. The clerk, an older woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Dorothy Keene, glanced at him. "That boy," Flint said, gesturing toward the curb outside. "He do that often." Dorothy's expression softened. "Every day, same time, 3:15, like clockwork. Been doing it for weeks now." "Where's he from?" "Lives about a mile up the road. Mother works 2 jobs. Good woman. Works herself half to death trying to keep that boy fed and clothed." Flint sipped his coffee, tasted nothing. "And the old guy, Walt, been sleeping under the overpass about 2 months. Quiet, doesn't cause trouble. Just lost, I think. Like a lot of folks these days." "The kid just gives him his lunch," Dorothy nodded. "Sweetest thing you ever saw. That boy's got a heart bigger than this whole county." Flint stared out the window at the empty curb. The homeless man was gone, now disappeared back beneath the overpass with his meal. The concrete looked abandoned, lonely, like a stage after the actors had left. He finished his coffee, thanked Dorothy, and walked back to his bike. But he didn't start the engine. Just sat there, one leg on either side of the Harley, staring at the spot where the boy had been. Something about this didn't add up. A kid that age giving away his lunch every single day. A mother working 2 jobs who probably packed that lunch with love and care, not knowing her son was going hungry. Flint thought about his own mother, Linda Brennan, dead at 39 from a stroke brought on by exhaustion, working 3 jobs to keep food on the table after his father left. He'd been 15 when she died. Old enough to understand what killed her wasn't the stroke. It was the grinding weight of poverty, of trying to do everything alone, of a system that ground people down until there was nothing left. He'd watched her work herself to death, watched her smile through the exhaustion, pretend everything was fine, pack his lunch every morning with hands that shook from fatigue. And he'd been powerless to stop it, 15 years old and powerless. But he wasn't 15 anymore. The next afternoon, Flint rode past Miller's Gas and Go again. Told himself it was coincidence that he just happened to need gas, that Route 9 was on his way home from the clubhouse. All lies but comfortable ones. He pulled in at 310 and parked where he could watch the road. At 3:15, exactly, the boy appeared. Same lunch sack, same careful walk to the curb. Same homeless man emerging from beneath the overpass like a ghost materializing from shadow. Same quiet ritual of giving and receiving. Same gentle placement of food. Same grateful nod. Flint studied the boy more carefully this time. Noticed things he'd missed before. The way the kid's jacket hung loose on his frame like it had been bought for someone bigger. The hollow beneath his cheekbones. The careful way he moved like someone trying to conserve energy. The dirt under his fingernails, not from playing, but from work, from doing things a 10-year-old shouldn't have to do. And when the boy handed over the sandwich, Flint saw his hands. Small, clean, but thin. The kind of thin that came from missing meals, from hunger that lived in the bones. Something cold settled in Flint's chest, a certainty he couldn't shake. This kid wasn't just being generous. This kid was starving. On the third day, Flint arrived at 2:45, bought a coffee from Dorothy, who smiled like she'd been expecting him. He sat on his bike and waited, watching the road, his mind turning over questions he wasn't sure he wanted answers to. At 3:15, right on schedule, the boy appeared. Flint watched him sit on the curb, watched him open the bag, watched him remove the sandwich, and this time Flint noticed something that made his throat tighten. The sandwich was still warm, freshly made that morning by a mother who probably woke before dawn to pack it with love, and the boy was about to give it away. Walt appeared, accepted the food, began to eat, and Flint saw the boy's face, saw the way he watched Walt with an expression that was part longing, part satisfaction, part something deeper. Like he was feeding more than just a homeless man's body, like he was feeding his own soul with this act of giving. But his hands were shaking, and when he stood to leave, he swayed slightly, caught himself steadied. Hunger, not the kind that came from missing one meal, the kind that came from missing many. Flint set his coffee down, rose from his bike, crossed the distance between them slowly, his boots crunching on gravel loud enough to announce his presence. The boy looked up, eyes widening, as the massive biker approached. But he didn't run, just clutched the empty bag tighter and stood his ground. Flint stopped a few feet away, kept his voice low and non-threatening. "That's a good thing you're doing." The boy nodded but didn't speak. "You do this every day." Another nod. "What's your name, son?" The boy hesitated, then answered quietly. "Ezra." "I'm Flint." He gestured toward the empty bag. "That your lunch?" Ezra's face flushed, and he looked down at his scuffed sneakers. "It's okay. I'm not that hungry." The words hit Flint like a fist. He'd heard that line before. From his mother, usually. From people who were lying to themselves and everyone else because admitting the truth meant admitting they'd failed somehow. "Where's your folks, Ezra?" "My mom works," said quickly defensively. "She makes my lunch every morning before her shift. And you give it away." Ezra's silence was answer enough. Flint knelt slowly, bringing himself level with the boy. Up close, he could see more. The way Ezra's collarbone pressed against his thin shirt, the shadows under his eyes, the way his lips were chapped and his skin had that pale quality that came from not enough food, not enough sunlight, not enough of anything a growing body needed. "Ezra," Flint said carefully, "why are you giving away your food?" The boy's eyes filled with tears. He tried hard to blink away. His voice came out barely louder than a whisper, cracking on the words. "Because if I don't, he won't eat at all." The world seemed to stop. The wind died. The distant highway traffic faded. Everything narrowed down to this moment, this boy, these words. 10 years old. 10. And already he understood sacrifice better than most grown men Flint had ever known. Already he'd made a choice that would break most adults. Already he was carrying a weight that should never belong to a child. Flint felt something crack open inside his chest. Something old and scarred and carefully protected. A door he'd kept locked for 30 years suddenly swinging wide. "And what about you?" Flint asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Ezra shrugged, still not meeting his eyes. "I'm okay." But he wasn't. Flint could see that clear as daylight. This kid was not okay. He was hungry and scared and trying so damn hard to be brave, to do the right thing, to help someone else, even when he had nothing left to give. And suddenly, this wasn't just about a generous kid. This was about something much bigger. Something that was going to require more than a kind word and a pat on the back. Flint stood slowly, his mind already turning. "Stay here," he said. He walked into Miller's Gas and go and bought everything they had that a kid could eat without cooking. Granola bars, crackers, beef jerky, chocolate milk, fruit cups, packages of cookies, bags of chips. He cleaned out half the snack aisle, piling it all on the counter, while Dorothy rang it up with tears in her eyes. "No charge," she said when she finished scanning. "Can't do that, Dorothy. That boy's been feeding Walt for 10 weeks with his own lunch. Least I can do is help feed him." Flint pulled out his wallet, extracted a $50 bill, and placed it on the counter. "Keep it, and stock up on more. I'll be back." When he returned outside, Ezra was still standing on the curb, the empty lunch bag clutched in his small hands. Walt sat against the wall, watching with those hollow, haunted eyes. Flint set 3 full bags down beside the boy. "This is for you," he said firmly. "Not for sharing, for you." Ezra stared at the bags, then up at Flint, confusion and gratitude and fear warring on his face. "I can't." "You can," Flint interrupted gently, "and you will." Walt spoke for the first time, his voice rough as gravel, raw as an open wound. "The boy's got a good heart." Flint met the old man's eyes, saw the shame there, the gratitude, the desperate pride of someone who'd lost everything but their dignity and was now losing that too. I can see that, Flint turned to Walt. What's your name? People call me Walt. Walter Calhoun, if we're being formal. You eat today, besides what Ezra brought. Walt shook his head slowly. No, sir. Flint walked back inside, returned with 2 hot dogs from the roller grill, a bag of chips, and a bottled water. He handed them to Walt without a word. For a moment, nobody spoke. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of distant rain. A truck rumbled past on Route 9, its engine fading into silence. Then Walt's weathered face crumpled slightly, and he nodded once. The kind of nod that carried weight, the kind that said more than any speech ever could. Appreciate it, Walt said quietly. Flint turned back to Ezra. You live close, about a mile up the road. Your mom know you're giving away your lunch. Ezra shook his head quickly, fear flashing across his face. She'd be upset. She works really hard to make it for me every morning. Where's she work? 2 jobs. Diner in the morning, cleaning offices at night. Flint's jaw tightened. He knew that grind, had watched his own mother kill herself with that exact grind. And your dad, Ezra's face closed off. He left. 2 words. But they explained everything. A single mother working herself to death, a kid going hungry so someone else could eat, a system that wasn't catching either of them before they fell through the cracks. Ezra, Flint said carefully, I'm going to ask you something and I need you to be honest. When's the last time you had a full meal? The boy looked down, picking at the edge of the paper bag. I eat breakfast sometimes at school, sometimes when I get there early enough. Flint felt anger rising, not at the kid, not at Walt, not even at Ezra's mother who was clearly doing everything she could, but at the unfairness of it all, at a world that could let a 10-year-old go hungry, at a system that forced children to choose between feeding themselves and feeding someone else. He pulled out his phone, made a call. Booker, he said when the line clicked, I need you at Miller's Gas and Go on Route 9. Bring the truck and whatever food we've got in the clubhouse kitchen. A pause on the other end. Then Booker Bear Dalton's voice came through, steady and unbothered. How much we talking? All of it. 15 minutes later, a pickup truck rumbled into the lot. Booker climbed out first, a mountain of a man with a shaved head and arms covered in tattoos. Behind him came Deacon Deke Mercer and Raymond Ray Guthrie, both carrying boxes. Ezra shrank back slightly as the bikers approached, his eyes going wide. 3 massive men in leather vests covered in ink, looking like they'd walked straight out of a nightmare. But Flint placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. They're with me, he said, and they're here to help. Booker set a box down and crouched beside Ezra with surprising gentleness for someone his size. Heard you've been doing good work out here, kid. Ezra blinked, uncertain, his voice small. I don't know what you mean. Deke opened another box, revealing canned goods, pasta, rice, bread, and peanut butter. This is for your mom, so she doesn't have to worry so much. Ray added a 3rd box, this one filled with clothes, including a winter jacket that looked brand new, tags still attached. Noticed your coat's getting thin. Going to be cold soon. Ezra's eyes went wide, his voice cracking when he spoke. I don't know what to say. Flint squeezed his shoulder gently. You don't have to say anything. They loaded everything into Booker's truck, and Flint told Ezra to climb in. We're taking you home, going to talk to your mom. Fear flickered across the boy's face. She's going to be bad I gave away my lunch. She's not going to be mad, Flint said firmly. Trust me. The house was exactly what Flint expected. A small rental at the end of a gravel road, its paint peeling and porch sagging, slightly under the weight of time and weather. But the yard was neat, and flowers grew in mismatched pots near the steps, bright spots of color against the general decay. Someone cared about this place. Someone was trying. When Sienna Hayes opened the door, she froze. 4 massive bikers standing on her porch, their shadows falling across her like omens. She was younger than Flint expected, maybe early 30s, with tired eyes and hands that looked like they'd worked too many hours without rest. She wore a diner uniform, grease stains on the apron, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her eyes found Ezra first, scanned him for injuries, then snapped back to Flint with the fierce protectiveness of a mother ready to fight the world. Miss Hayes, Flint said, carefully removing his sunglasses. We're not here to cause trouble. We just wanted to talk to you about your son. Sienna's face went pale. Is he okay? Did something happen? He's fine, Flynn assured her quickly. Better than fine, actually, but there's something you should know. They told her everything. About the lunches, about Walt, about Ezra's quiet kindness and the weight he'd been carrying alone for 10 weeks, about how he'd been going hungry so someone else could eat. By the time they finished, Sienna was crying, one hand pressed to her mouth, her whole body shaking. I didn't know, she whispered. I had no idea he was going without. That's because he didn't want you to know, Flint said gently. He was trying to protect you. Sienna pulled Ezra into a fierce hug, and the boy finally let himself cry. All the weight of 10 weeks crashing down at once. All the hunger and fear and loneliness pouring out in great heaving sobs against his mother's shoulder. She held him tight, whispering things Flint couldn't hear, promises and apologies and love. The bikers carried the boxes inside, stacking them neatly in the small kitchen. When they finished, Booker handed Sienna an envelope. There's phone numbers in there, he said. Food bank, community center, these people who can help. You call them. You hear me? Sienna nodded, clutching the envelope like a lifeline, her eyes red from crying. I don't know how to thank you. Don't need thanks, Booker said. Just take care of your boy and let people help sometimes. You don't have to do this alone. As they turned to leave, Ezra ran forward and wrapped his arms around Flint's waist. The boy barely came up to his ribs, this tiny, fierce creature, hugging a man 3 times his size. Thank you, Ezra said, his voice muffled against the leather vest. Flint rested a hand on the boy's head, his throat tight, words failing him. You take care of yourself, kid, and let other people help sometimes. You don't have to carry everything alone. They walked back to the truck in silence, climbed in, started the engine. But before Booker could pull away, Flint turned back to look at the house. Sienna and Ezra stood in the doorway, the boy's hand in his mother's, both of them waving. And for the first time in weeks since Smokey's funeral, since the long ride that had brought him to Miller's Gas and Go, Flint felt something other than grief, something fragile and unfamiliar. He felt hope. Back at the gas station, Walt was still sitting beneath the overhang, the empty hot dog wrappers folded neatly beside him. He looked up when Flint's bike pulled in, his weathered face unreadable. Flint walked over, handed him a blanket from the saddlebag and another meal from Dorothy's counter. There's a shelter 2 towns over, he said. Clean beds, hot food, people who can help. I can give you a ride. Walt looked at him for a long moment, the kind of look that measured a man. Weighed his intentions, searched for the catch, because in Walt's experience, there was always a catch. But Flint just stood there, patient, waiting. Finally, Walt nodded slowly. Maybe it's time. They rode in silence, Flint on his Harley and Walt in Booker's truck, the old man staring out the window at the countryside sliding past. When they reached the shelter, a converted church with warm lights in the windows, Walt hesitated at the entrance. I ain't been inside in 2 years, he said quietly. Don't know if I remember how. You remember, Flint said. You just forgot for a while, but you remember. Walt nodded, took a breath, and walked inside. The door closed behind him, and Flint stood there for a moment, watching through the window as shelter staff greeted the old man, led him somewhere deeper into the building, somewhere safe. He thought about Ezra, about Sienna, about all the people out there right now struggling alone, too proud or too scared or too exhausted to ask for help. He thought about his mother, who died because she couldn't ask for help, couldn't admit she was drowning, couldn't let go of her pride long enough to let someone save her. He thought about the look on Ezra's face when he'd said those words, cracking with tears, explaining his choice with a child's devastating clarity about what would happen if he stopped. 10 years old, carrying the weight of the world on shoulders too small to bear it, and still choosing kindness, still choosing to give. Flint climbed back on his bike, started the engine, and rode toward the clubhouse. The Iron Reapers would be there tonight, drinking and playing poker, and telling stories about Smokey keeping his memory alive the only way bikers knew how. And Flint would tell them about a boy named Ezra who'd reminded him what strength really looked like. Not the ability to throw a punch or ride 1,000 miles or stare down danger without flinching, but the courage to give away the last thing you had, the strength to feed someone else when you were starving. The choice to look at suffering and say, not on my watch, even when you were just a kid with nothing but a lunch sack and a heart too big for this broken world. That night, Flint sat in the clubhouse surrounded by his brothers, but his mind was elsewhere. On a curb outside Miller's Gas and Go, on a boy who showed up every day at 3:15, on the quiet heroism of someone who'd never know how much he'd changed in the span of a single conversation. Booker noticed, slid a beer across the table. "You good, brother?" Flint nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I am." For the first time in a long time, he meant it. Word spread fast among the Iron Reapers. By the end of the week, the clubhouse had become an unofficial collection point for donations. Canned goods, clothes, and cash piling up on tables usually reserved for beer and poker chips. Brothers who rarely spoke about feelings beyond the road were suddenly organizing food drives and calling local charities to figure out how to help families like Ezra's. Flint found himself in the center of it all, uncomfortable with the attention, but unwilling to step back. Because every time he thought about walking away, he remembered that small voice cracking with tears, explaining his choice with words that would haunt Flint forever. That devastating clarity about what would happen if he stopped showing up at 3:15. The boy had been 10 years old and already understood sacrifice better than most grown men. 2 weeks after their first meeting on a Saturday morning that dawned cold and clear, Ezra showed up at Miller's Gas and Go wearing the new jacket Ray had given him. It fit better now, not quite so oversized, and the boy looked different somehow, less hollow. His cheeks had filled out slightly, and there was color in his face that hadn't been there before. He arrived at 2:30 earlier than usual, carrying a backpack that looked heavy. Dorothy was behind the counter, and she smiled when she saw him. "Afternoon, sweetheart. You're early today." "I wanted to help set up," Ezra said, his voice stronger than Flint remembered. "Mr. Flint said they were bringing stuff today. Food for other families." Dorothy's expression softened. "That's real sweet of you, honey. But you don't have to, you know. You've done enough." "I want to." Ezra set his backpack down, started rolling up his sleeves. "If people helped me, I should help them too. That's how it works, right?" And there it was, the thing that made this kid different. Not just grateful for the help he'd received, but ready to pay it forward. Ready to be part of the solution instead of just a recipient of charity. At 3 o'clock, the Iron Reapers arrived. Not just Flint and Booker and the others who'd come that first day, but a dozen riders, their motorcycles rumbling into the lot like thunder. They carried boxes and bags and determination, unloading supplies with the same precision they used for everything else. Organized chaos. Controlled power. Ezra watched with wide eyes as they set up folding tables, arranged canned goods by type, created order from what had been a scattered collection of donations. Flint saw him standing there and waved him over. "You ready to work, kid?" Ezra nodded, eager. "What do I do?" "See those cans? Need them sorted. Vegetables here, soups there, fruits over there. Think you can handle that?" "Yes, sir." Flint watched the boy dive in his small hands, moving quickly, sorting and stacking, with a focus that seemed beyond his years. Other riders noticed too. Booker came over, stood beside Flint, arms crossed. "Kid's got drive," Booker said quietly. "Kid's got heart." Same thing usually. By 4 o'clock, families started arriving. They came tentatively at first, uncertain, some looking ashamed to be there. A young mother with 2 toddlers clinging to her legs. An elderly couple who moved slowly, carefully, like they were afraid of taking up too much space. A middle-aged man who'd clearly been out of work for a while, his clothes clean but worn thin. Ezra greeted each of them, not with pity but with genuine warmth. "Hi, I'm Ezra. Can I help you find something?" His voice steady, confident, like he'd been doing this for years instead of minutes. The young mother looked at him, surprised. "You work here, sweetheart?" "I volunteer. We've got food, clothes, whatever you need. No paperwork. No questions." Flint heard the exchange from across the parking lot and felt something shift in his chest. The kid had taken his words, internalized them, made them his own. No paperwork, no questions, no shame. The distribution ran for 3 hours. By the time the sun started setting, they'd helped 23 families. Not just with food, but with dignity. With the message that needing help didn't make you less than. That community meant showing up for each other. As the last family pulled away, Ezra started cleaning up without being asked. Folding tables, organizing what was left, sweeping the concrete with a broom Dorothy provided. Flint watched him work, this small, fierce creature who'd somehow become the heart of something bigger than any of them had planned. When everything was packed away, Ezra came over to where Flint stood by his bike. The boy looked tired but satisfied, the kind of exhaustion that came from good work well done. Thank you for letting me help, Ezra said. Flint shook his head. You don't thank me for that. This whole thing exists because of you. But you're the one who actually did something. I just gave away my lunch. You gave away your lunch every day for 10 weeks. You saw someone suffering, and you acted. That's not just, that's everything. Ezra looked down at his new sneakers. Flint had noticed those too, probably from his mother, with the first paycheck that wasn't stretched quite so thin. When the boy looked back up, there were tears in his eyes. Can I ask you something? Anything, kid. Do you think other families are like mine, people who need help but don't ask? Flint dropped to one knee, making himself small despite his size. I think there's a lot of people out there struggling alone, too proud to ask, too scared, too tired. Yeah, I think there's a lot of families just like yours. Ezra nodded slowly, processing this. Then we need to help them too. We, you and me and everyone. We can't just stop now. There's too many people. And there it was. The moment Flint realized this wasn't just about one boy anymore. This was about something larger. A movement that had started with Ezra's choice and grown into something that could actually change lives. You're right, Flint said. We can't stop now. Over the next month, the distribution center at Miller's became permanent. The Iron Reapers partnered with local churches and businesses, keeping the tables stocked every Saturday. Word spread through the county. Families who'd been struggling in silence started showing up tentative at first, then with growing confidence. And Ezra was there every weekend, every single Saturday without fail from 2:30 until the last family left. He helped sort donations, greeted arrivals, carried boxes for elderly folks who couldn't manage them alone. He learned names, remembered details, asked about kids and jobs and life beyond the immediate crisis of hunger. The other volunteers, hardened bikers who'd seen the worst of humanity, watched this 10-year-old lead by example and found themselves trying to match his compassion. Deke, who'd spent 15 years in prison and trusted exactly nobody, started calling families by name. Ray, who'd never had kids of his own, began keeping toys in his truck to hand out to children who came through. And Flint watched it, all watched Ezra transform from a scared, hungry kid into something else entirely. A leader, a symbol, the living proof that age didn't matter when it came to making a difference. But not everyone was happy about it. 6 weeks into the operation, on a cold Saturday in late October, a black Mercedes pulled into Miller's lot. The distribution was in full swing, maybe 30 people milling around the tables, when a man in an expensive suit climbed out of the luxury car. Frank Kozlowski, 55 years old, owner of a dozen properties in the county, including the land Miller's Gas and Go sat on. He was a big man, not in the way Flint was big, all muscle and road-worn strength, but in the way money made men big. Soft around the middle, manicured hands, the kind of confidence that came from never having to fight for anything. He stood there for a moment, surveying the scene with obvious distaste. Then he walked straight to Dorothy, who was manning the front table. "What the hell is this?" His voice carried across the parking lot, sharp and entitled. Dorothy straightened, her kind face hardening. "It's a food distribution, Frank, helping folks who need it. On my property. Did anyone think to ask me? The parking lot's public access. We checked." Kozlowski's face reddened. "You're turning my gas station into a homeless shelter. This is going to destroy property values." Flint moved then, crossing the distance with purposeful strides. Ezra was nearby, watching with wide, worried eyes, and Flint caught his gaze, shook his head slightly. "Stay back." "There a problem here?" Flint asked, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made Kozlowski take a step backward. "You in charge of this circus? I'm part of it. What's your concern?" Kozlowski gestured at the families at the tables, at everything. "My concern is you're running an illegal operation on my land, attracting the wrong element. I want it shut down. We have all the proper permits, food handling licenses, everything's legal. I don't care about permits. This is bad for business." Flint looked around at the families. A mother feeding her baby, an old man carefully selecting canned vegetables, a teenage girl helping her younger siblings pick out winter coats. Looks like good business to me, helping people. "I'm not running a charity, I'm running a business. And next week I'm raising Dorothy's rent 300%. If she can't pay, she's out. And your little food pantry goes with her." The threat hung in the air like poison. Dorothy's face went pale. 300% would bankrupt her. She'd been running Miller's for 20 years on thin margins, barely scraping by. This would destroy her. Flint felt anger rising hot and familiar, the kind that had gotten him in trouble when he was younger. But before he could respond, Ezra stepped forward. The boy walked right up to Kozlowski, had to crane his neck to look up at the man's face. His voice was small but steady. "Why do you want to hurt people?" Kozlowski looked down, surprised. "Excuse me, these people need help. We're helping them. Why do you want to stop that?" "Kid, this is business. You wouldn't understand." "I understand hunger," Ezra said. "I understand what it's like to have nothing. And I understand that you have everything and you still want to take away the one place people can get help. That's not business. That's just mean." Kozlowski's face flushed darker. "Listen, kid, the real world doesn't run on feelings. It runs on money. And this," he gestured at the distribution center, "is costing me money." "How?" The question caught Kozlowski off guard. "What? How is it costing you money? Nobody's using your gas station less. Nobody's staying away. If anything, more people know about it now." The man sputtered, searching for an answer. "It's about optics, about perception. People see this and they think the area is in decline. Or they see people helping each other and think the area has heart." Ezra's voice didn't waver. "You could help too, you know. You own buildings. You have money. You could feed so many people." "I'm not a charity. Nobody's asking you to be. Just asking you not to hurt people who are already hurting." The parking lot had gone quiet. Everyone watching this exchange. A 10-year-old boy facing down a wealthy businessman with nothing but honesty and conviction. Kozlowski looked around, saw all the eyes on him, and his expression hardened. "This conversation is over. Dorothy, you'll get the new lease terms Monday. Everyone else, you have 2 weeks to find somewhere else to do this." He turned and walked back to his Mercedes, climbed in, and drove away without looking back. The silence that followed felt heavy, final, like something precious had just been broken. Dorothy was crying quietly. Flint put a hand on her shoulder, but there was nothing to say. They all knew what this meant. Without Miller's, they had no distribution center. And without a distribution center, all these families would have nowhere to go. Ezra stood very still, his hands clenched into fists, his face red from trying not to cry. Flint went to him, knelt down. "Hey, look at me." The boy raised his eyes, and Flint saw fury there, and helplessness, and shame, like somehow this was his fault. "This isn't over," Flint said. "He's going to close us down." "Maybe, but we've got 2 weeks. A lot can happen in 2 weeks." "Like what?" Flint didn't have an answer, but he couldn't let this kid lose hope. "Not after everything. I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. We always do." That night, Flint called an emergency meeting at the clubhouse. Every member of the Iron Reapers showed up, along with volunteers from the churches and businesses that had partnered with them. They sat around tables covered in maps and papers and coffee cups, trying to solve an impossible problem. Dorothy needed $18,000 to cover the rent increase for the first year. After that, Kozlowski could raise it again, price her out permanently. Even if they raised the money, it was only a temporary fix. They could find a new location, but that would take time. Permits, inspections, negotiations, and in the meantime, families would go without. The discussion went in circles for 2 hours, frustration building, hope fading. Then Booker spoke up. "What if we go to the town council? Public pressure. Make Kozlowski look like the bad guy." "He is the bad guy," Deke muttered. "Yeah, but he's also a major donor to the mayor's campaign. Council's not going to cross him unless we give them a reason." Flint rubbed his face, exhausted. "What kind of reason?" "The kid," Booker said. "Ezra, let him speak. Tell his story. If people hear what he's been doing, what this place means, they'll support us. He's 10 years old. You want to put him in front of the town council? I want to give us a fighting chance, and that kid's got something none of us have. He's got innocence, truth. When he speaks, people listen. You saw it today with Kozlowski." Flint thought about Ezra standing up to a man 3 times his size, asking why he wanted to hurt people. Thought about the boy's voice, steady and clear, cutting through all the bullshit to the simple truth underneath. "I'll ask him," Flint said. "But it's his choice. I'm not putting that kind of pressure on a kid unless he wants to do it." The next afternoon, Flint met Ezra at Miller's. The distribution was smaller today, word having spread about the potential closure. Families were already looking for alternatives, preparing for the worst. They sat on the curb where Flint had first seen Ezra hand lunch to Walt, the same spot where everything had started. "I need to ask you something," Flint said, "and I need you to know you can say no. No pressure, no judgment." Ezra looked at him, waiting. "There's a town council meeting Tuesday night. We're going to ask them to help us. Put pressure on Kozlowski, maybe find a way to keep this place running. But it would help if you spoke, told them your story, why this matters. In front of everyone, in front of the whole council, maybe 50, 60 people, including Kozlowski probably." Ezra was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. "I'm not good at talking in front of people. I get scared." "I know. And that's okay. Like I said, you can say no. But if I say no, we might lose this place. Maybe, maybe not. But that's not on you. You're 10 years old. This shouldn't be your responsibility." The boy nodded, slowly processing. Then he looked up at Flint with those eyes that had seen too much too soon. "When I gave Walt my lunch that first time, I was scared too. Scared he'd be mean or laugh at me or I don't know. But I did it anyway because it was the right thing. This is different. Is it people need help? I can help by telling them why it matters. So I should write, even if I'm scared." Flint felt his throat tighten. "Yeah, kid, I guess you should." Ezra spent the next 3 days preparing. Sienna helped him write his speech, though most of the words were his own, simple, direct, true. Flint offered to practice with him, but Ezra said he wanted to save it, didn't want to wear out the words before they mattered. Tuesday night arrived cold and clear. The town council met in the old courthouse, a building that had stood for 100 years and smelled like furniture polish and important decisions. The chamber was packed, more than 60 people, including reporters from the local paper and a TV crew from the county seat. Kozlowski sat in the front row, his expensive suit immaculate, his expression bored. Like this was beneath him. Like the outcome was already decided. Flint sat with Sienna and Ezra in the back, the boy wearing his best clothes, his hair combed, his hands shaking slightly. Sienna held one hand, Flint held the other. They didn't speak, just sat there, lending him their strength. The council went through regular business first. Rezoning requests, budget approvals, the tedious machinery of small-town government. Then Mayor David Brennan, a tired-looking man in his late 50s, called for public comments. Flint stood. "Mr. Mayor, council members, I'd like to speak about the food distribution center at Miller's Gas and Go." Brennan nodded. "You have 3 minutes, Mr. Brennan." Flint walked to the podium, aware of every eye on him. He wasn't nervous exactly. He'd faced down worse than a town council, but the stakes felt different this time. Higher. "My name is Garrett Brennan. Most of you know me as Flint. I'm vice president of the Iron Reapers Motorcycle Club. 6 weeks ago, we started a food distribution program at Miller's. Since then, we've served over 800 meals to more than 90 families in this county. Families who were struggling, going hungry, too proud or too scared to ask for help." He paused, let that sink in. "We did this legally, got all the permits, followed all the rules, and it's made a real difference. But now Mr. Kozlowski here wants to shut us down by raising Dorothy Keene's rent 300%. Not because we're breaking any laws, not because we're causing problems, but because he doesn't like the look of poor people getting help." Kozlowski shifted in his seat, his jaw tight. "Now I could stand here and argue about property rights and business ethics and all that," Flint continued. "But instead I'd like you to hear from someone else. Someone who can explain better than I can why this matters. Ezra Hayes is 10 years old, and he's the reason any of this exists." Flint stepped aside. Ezra walked to the podium, so small he had to stand on his toes to reach the microphone. Sienna had adjusted it lower, but he still looked tiny up there, dwarfed by the room in the moment. For a few seconds, he just stood there, breathing. The room was completely silent. Even the reporters had stopped moving, sensing something important about to happen. When Ezra spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried. "My name is Ezra Cordell Hayes. I'm 10 years old, and I used to be really hungry." He paused, swallowed hard, continued. "My mom works 2 jobs. She makes my lunch every morning before her first shift. She puts in a sandwich and an apple and juice, And she writes my name on the bag because she wants me to know I matter. She's the best mom in the world. His voice cracked slightly, but he kept going. About 3 months ago, I met a man named Walt. He's homeless. He was so hungry he was shaking, and I had a lunch my mom made with love, so I gave it to him. Ezra looked out at the crowd, his eyes finding flint drawing strength. I did that every day for 10 weeks. Every day I gave Walt my lunch, and every day I went home hungry. Not because I wanted to, but because without my help, that man would starve. And that seemed wrong. It seemed wrong that anyone should be that hungry when I had food. Someone in the audience made a soft sound, maybe a sob. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't want her to worry. I didn't want her to feel bad. I just did it because it was the right thing. But then Mr. Flint saw me, and instead of telling me to stop, instead of saying I was too young or it wasn't my responsibility, he helped. He helped me and my mom and Walt and everyone. Ezra's hands gripped the podium. Because of the food distribution center, my mom doesn't have to work so hard. Because of it, Walt's not homeless anymore. He has a barnyard and a place to live. Because of it, 90 families don't have to choose between food and rent, between medicine and meals. He turned to look directly at Kozlowski. Mr. Kozlowski, you ask me why I care about this. I care because I know what hungry feels like. I know what it's like to go to bed with your stomach hurting. I know what it's like to be too embarrassed to tell anyone you need help. And I know that if someone had helped my family sooner, maybe things wouldn't have gotten so bad. His voice grew stronger. This isn't about property values or business or money. This is about people, real people who are suffering right now. And you have the power to help them or hurt them. I'm asking you, please don't hurt them. They've been hurt enough. Ezra looked back at the council. I'm 10 years old. I don't know about politics or economics or any of that stuff. But I know right from wrong, and shutting down the only place that's helping people, that's wrong. Please don't let it happen. He stepped back from the microphone, his whole body trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. The room erupted, not in polite applause, but in real emotion. People standing, crying, calling out support. Mayor Brennan had to bang his gavel 3 times to restore order. His eyes were red and his voice was thick when he spoke. Thank you, Ezra. That was very brave. He turned to the council. I think we need to discuss this. The council members conferred in whispers. Kozlowski sat rigid, his face unreadable. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, Brennan spoke. Mr. Kozlowski, in light of this testimony, the council would like to propose a compromise. The town will subsidize Dorothy Keene's rent increase for 1 year, giving the distribution center time to find alternative arrangements or funding. In exchange, we ask that you maintain the current lease terms. Kozlowski stood. That's using taxpayer money to interfere with private business. That's using taxpayer money to feed taxpayers who are hungry, Brennan shot back. The optics of fighting this, Frank. After what this boy just said, you really want that fight. The businessman's jaw worked. He looked around the room, saw all the eyes on him, saw the cameras recording, saw the battle he'd lose in the court of public opinion, even if he won legally. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. 1 year, but after that, this is done. 1 year, Brennan agreed, all in favor. The vote was unanimous. Ezra collapsed into Flint's arms outside the courthouse, the adrenaline finally draining away. Sienna was crying and laughing at the same time, hugging them both. The Iron Reapers surrounded them, a wall of leather and protection and pride. You did it, kid, Booker said, his voice rough. You actually did it. But Ezra was shaking his head. We only got 1 year. That's not enough. It's enough for now, Flint said. 1 year's a lifetime. A lot can happen. What happened over the next 2 months surprised everyone. The media coverage of Ezra's speech went viral, first locally, then statewide. A 10-year-old boy who'd given away his lunch for 10 weeks now, fighting to keep a food distribution center open. It was the kind of story that cut through the noise, that reminded people goodness still existed. Donations poured in, not just from the county, but from across the state. Churches, businesses, individuals who'd seen the news coverage and wanted to help. Within 6 weeks, they had enough money to cover Dorothy's rent for 3 years, enough to expand the program, enough to start thinking bigger. And through it all, Ezra kept showing up. Every Saturday without fail from 2:30 until closing, greeting families, sorting donations, leading by example. But Flint noticed changes. The boy was carrying weight again, different this time. Not hunger, but responsibility. The way he watched the families with a kind of desperate intensity, like he was personally responsible for solving everyone's problems. One Saturday, Flint found Ezra sitting alone behind the gas station, crying quietly. It was late afternoon, the distribution winding down, and the boy had slipped away when he thought no one was watching. Flint sat beside him on the cold concrete, didn't speak, just sat there present. Finally, Ezra wiped his eyes. I can't save everyone. No, you can't. Then what's the point? Flint thought about that. The point is you save who you can. You do what's in front of you. You give what you have. And you trust that it's enough even when it doesn't feel like enough. But there's so many people hurting. I know. And we only help 90 families. What about the others? What about the ones we don't even know about? Ezra, you're 10 years old. You're not supposed to carry the world. But I started this. I made people pay attention. Now, if I stop, if I can't fix everything, then I failed. Flint turned to look at the boy, saw his own younger self there. The crushing weight of responsibility that came from caring too much, from seeing suffering and feeling like every bit of it was somehow your fault if you didn't fix it. You didn't fail, Flint said firmly. You did the exact opposite. You saw one person suffering and you helped. That rippled out, became something bigger. But you're not meant to shoulder all of it. Community means distributing the weight, we each carry a piece. I just want people to be okay. I know, but okay is a process, not a destination. And you're part of that process. A big part. But you're part of the engine, not the entire machine. Ezra leaned against Flint's shoulder, exhausted. I miss when it was just me and Walt in a sandwich. That was simple. Yeah, it was, but simple doesn't feed 90 families. Sometimes things have to get complicated to make real change. They sat there as the sun set, as the last families drove away, as Dorothy turned off the lights inside Miller's. And Flint thought about the long road ahead. 1 year of guaranteed funding. After that, uncertainty. But they had 1 year. And they had this kid, this impossible, fierce, compassionate kid who'd started a movement with nothing but his choice and a heart too big for this world. That was enough. For now, it was enough. 6 months passed like water through fingers. Winter came to Route 9, bringing cold that bit through jackets and turned the ground hard as iron. The distribution center at Miller's kept running every Saturday, without fail, now serving an average of 30 families per week. The operation had grown beyond what any of them imagined that first day when Flint watched a small boy give away his lunch. Ezra turned 11 in January. His mother threw him a small party at their house, now a different rental, larger, with a yard where flowers would grow come spring. Sienna had quit her night job cleaning offices, working full-time as the distribution center's paid coordinator. Not much money, but enough. Enough to sleep more than 4 hours. Enough to see her son in the evenings. Enough to stop measuring their lives in what they couldn't afford and start thinking about what might be possible. The boy had changed too, grown 3 inches, filled out through the shoulders and chest. His face had lost that hollow, desperate look, replaced by something steadier, more grounded. But his eyes still carried that old soul quality, that awareness that came from seeing too much too soon. He still showed up every Saturday at 2:30, still greeted every family by name, still worked harder than volunteers twice his age. But there was a lightness to him now that hadn't been there before, like he'd finally started to believe what Flint had told him, that he didn't have to carry everything alone. Walt Calhoun showed up to Ezra's birthday party clean-shaven and wearing clothes that fit. He'd been sober for 5 months, working as a maintenance instructor at the community college 2 towns over, teaching kids barely older than Ezra how to fix engines, repair electrical systems, rebuild things that were broken. He brought Ezra a toolbox as a gift, carefully selected from his first real paycheck in years. Every man needs good tools, Walt said when Ezra opened it, for building things, for fixing what's broke, for making the world a little better, one repair at a time. Ezra hugged him, this boy who'd saved his life with nothing but a sandwich, in the radical act of seeing him as human. Walt hugged back, his weathered hands gentle on the boy's shoulders, and Flint watched from across the room with something fierce and protective swelling in his chest. This was what mattered. Not the numbers, not the media coverage, not the donations or the recognition. This moment, a man who'd been ready to die, now teaching others how to build. A boy who'd been starving, now surrounded by people who loved him. a small triumph against the vast indifference of the universe. 2 weeks after the party, Ezra's school principal called Flint directly. The conversation was brief, formal, and ended with an invitation to a ceremony the following Thursday evening. "We're giving Ezra the Young Citizen of the Year award," Principal Catherine Walsh explained. "It's a county-wide honor. Usually goes to high school students, but the board voted unanimously. What your boy's done, what he's built, it's remarkable. We'd like you to be there." "I'm not his father," Flint said automatically. "No, but from what I understand, you're close enough. Will you come?" "Yes, ma'am, I'll be there." The ceremony was held in the high school auditorium, a cavernous space that smelled like floor wax and teenage anxiety. 200 people filled the seats, parents and students and teachers and local officials. The Iron Reapers took up an entire row near the back, 8 men in suits instead of leather. Their hair combed, their beards trimmed. They looked uncomfortable, but determined like soldiers at a formal dinner. Sienna sat in the front row wearing a dress Flint had never seen before. Her hair down her hands clasped tight in her lap. She looked terrified and proud in equal measure. Ezra sat on stage with 5 other award recipients, all of them high school students who'd done impressive things. Started recycling programs, organized fundraisers, led community service projects. All good work, all worthy of recognition. But when Principal Walsh called Ezra's name when she began reading his citation, the room went quiet in a way it hadn't for the others. Ezra Cordell Hayes, age 11, is receiving this award for sustained service to his community under extraordinary circumstances. 4 months ago, Ezra was discovered giving away his school lunch every day to a homeless man, despite being hungry himself. When asked why, he answered with words that would change everything: "Without my help, that man would starve." The principal's voice caught slightly. She cleared her throat, continued. Rather than accepting help quietly, Ezra became the catalyst for a movement. The food distribution center that now serves over 30 families every week exists because this young man had the courage to act on his compassion. He volunteers over 15 hours weekly, has helped coordinate the distribution of more than 3,000 meals, and has inspired countless others to contribute to their community. She turned to look at Ezra, who sat very still in his chair, his face red. Ezra Hayes embodies the best of what we hope to teach our young people. Not just academic excellence, but moral courage. Not just individual achievement, but service to others. Not just knowing what's right, but doing it even when it's hard. Ezra, please come accept your award. The boy stood on shaking legs, walked to the podium, accepted the plaque from Principal Walsh with both hands. Then he turned to face the audience, and Flint saw the fear in his eyes. The same fear that had been there at the town council meeting. But underneath it, something else. Determination. Ezra had written a speech. Flint knew because Sienna had mentioned it had helped him practice. But when the priest reached the microphone, he didn't pull out any notes. Just stood there looking out at 200 faces and spoke from someplace deeper than preparation. "I don't know if I deserve this," he said, his voice small but clear. "All I did was share my lunch. That's not special. That's just what you're supposed to do when someone's hungry and you have food." He paused, gathering courage. "But I think maybe that's the point. None of us are supposed to be special to help people. We're just supposed to see when someone needs help and do something about it. Even if we're scared, even if we don't have much to give, even if we're just kids." His eyes found Flint in the crowd, held there for a moment. "I used to think I was weak because I was hungry all the time, because I couldn't fix my family's problems, because I was just one small person in a big world full of suffering. But then I met someone who taught me different. Mr. Garrett Brennan, most people call him Flint. He's a biker, looks scary, but he's the kindest person I know." Flint felt every eye in the auditorium turn toward him, felt heat rising in his face. "Mr. Flint saw me giving away my lunch, and he didn't tell me to stop. He didn't say I was too young or it wasn't my responsibility. He asked me why, and when I told him, he helped. Not by doing it for me, but by doing it with me. By showing me that one person caring can become two, people caring can become a whole community caring." Ezra's voice grew stronger. "There's also Mr. Walt Calhoun. When I met him, he was homeless and hungry and ready to give up. But he's here tonight. He has a job now. He has a home. He teaches people how to fix things. And all because someone cared enough to share a sandwich." Walt, sitting 3 rows back, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I'm not telling you this to brag," Ezra continued. "I'm telling you because I want you to know that you don't have to be big or strong or rich or special to change someone's life. You just have to care. You just have to act. You just have to be willing to give whatever you have, even if it doesn't seem like much. He looked down at the plaque in his hands. This award says Young Citizen of the Year, but I think every person who volunteers at the distribution center should get one. Every person who donated food or money or time. Every family who came and accepted help, even though it was hard. We all did this together. I just happened to go first. The applause started before he finished building until it shook the room. People standing, crying, the other award recipients on stage clapping hardest of all. Ezra stepped up back from the microphone, overwhelmed, and Principal Walsh put a hand on his shoulder, guided him back to his seat. But the applause didn't stop. Went on for 2 full minutes, wave after wave of recognition and gratitude and hope. When it finally faded, when the ceremony concluded and people began filing out, Ezra was surrounded, students wanting photos, teachers offering congratulations, parents thanking him for inspiring their children. He handled it with grace that seemed impossible for someone so young, humble, and genuine, and slightly embarrassed by all the attention. Flint waited until the crowd thinned, then walked over. Ezra saw him and broke away from a conversation with a reporter, ran the last few steps, and wrapped his arms around Flint's waist. "You came," the boy said, his voice muffled against leather. "Course I came, wouldn't miss it. Did I do okay with the speech?" "You did perfect, kid." They stood like that for a moment, this unlikely pair, the massive biker and the small boy, who'd somehow found each other in a gas station parking lot and changed everything. Sienna approached, her eyes red from crying. "Thank you," she said to Flint, "for all of it, for seeing him when no one else did. He made himself pretty hard to miss. Still, thank you." The year mark arrived in early spring. 12 months since Flint first saw Ezra hand his lunch to Walt. 12 months of growth and struggle and small victories. The distribution center had now served 1,847 meals to 134 different families. Walt had been sober for 8 months. Sienna had opened a small cafe next to Miller's, nothing fancy, just coffee and sandwiches, but it was hers. Ezra had grown 4 inches and gained 15 pounds and made the school baseball team. The Iron Reapers threw a celebration at the clubhouse, inviting everyone who'd been part of the journey, families who'd received help, volunteers who'd given time, donors who'd contributed money, even Dorothy, who closed Miller's early for the first time in 20 years to attend. Flint stood in the center of it all, watching people eat and laugh and share stories, and felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Purpose, not the shallow purpose of the road or the brotherhood, good as those things were, but deeper purpose, the kind that came from building something that mattered. Booker appeared at his elbow, handed him a beer. "Hell of a thing we did here, brother." "Ezra did it. We just helped." "Don't sell yourself short. Kid had the heart, but you had the vision. You saw what it could become." Flint shook his head. "I just asked a question." He gave the answer. Across the room, Ezra was showing a group of younger kids how to sort canned goods by expiration date, his voice patient, his manner confident, leadership growing in him like something inevitable. "What happens when the funding runs out?" Booker asked quietly. "Kozlowski's lease agreement is up in 2 months. Town subsidy ends with it." "We'll figure it out. Always do." "You sound pretty confident for someone who doesn't have a plan." Flint took a long pull from his beer. "Plan's the same as it's always been. Show up, do the work, trust that it matters." "That's not a plan, that's faith." "Maybe that's what we've been building all along." 3 weeks later, something happened that nobody saw coming. Dorothy Keene died in her sleep. Peaceful, the doctor said. Heart just stopped during the night. She was 73 years old and had worked at Miller's Gas and Go for 22 years, had seen thousands of people pass through, had been kind to every single one, had given Flint free coffee that first day, and never charged him fairly after. Her funeral was held on a Wednesday. The whole town showed up. The church overflowed, people standing in the aisles and spilling out onto the steps. Flint gave a eulogy, though he'd never done such a thing before, his voice rough with grief as he talked about a woman who'd shown him that kindness didn't require permission or credentials or anything except the willingness to care. Ezra sat in the front pew with Sienna crying quietly. Dorothy had been like a grandmother to him, had slipped him cookies when Sienna wasn't looking, had told him stories about the old days when Route 9 was busier and the world felt smaller and people still looked out for each other. After the service, after they'd lowered her into the ground and said their goodbyes, the lawyer handling Dorothy's estate asked to speak with Flint and Ezra privately. They met in a small office that smelled like old paper and furniture polish. The lawyer, a woman in her 50s named Margaret Hollis, opened a folder and looked at them over her reading glasses. Dorothy was a private woman, Margaret said. Didn't have much family, never married, no children, but she made her intentions very clear in her will. She pulled out a document, slid it across the desk. She left Miller's Gas and Go to you, both of you, joint ownership, Ezra Cordell Hayes and Garrett Flint Brennan, along with a letter. Flint stared at the document, unable to process what he was reading. Beside him, Ezra had gone very still. She left us the gas station. Flint's voice came out strangled. The land, the building, the business, everything. It's yours, free and clear. She bought it from Kozlowski 6 months ago. Apparently used her life savings. Didn't tell anyone. Margaret handed them an envelope. She wanted you to read this together. Flint opened it with shaking hands. Dorothy's handwriting, spidery and careful, filled 2 pages. Dear Flint and Ezra, if you're reading this, I've gone on to whatever comes next. Don't be sad. 73 years is enough for anyone, and I got to spend my last ones watching something beautiful grow. I bought Miller's because, I couldn't stand the thought of Frank Kozlowski destroying what you built. That man has plenty. You have something more important. You have purpose. You have community. You have each other. Ezra, you reminded me why I've stayed in this dusty gas station for 22 years. Because sometimes in the most unlikely places, you get to witness miracles. A boy giving away his lunch is a miracle. A biker who stops to ask why is a miracle. A community coming together to care for its own is a miracle. Flint, you think you're not a good man because of your past. But goodness isn't about where you've been. It's about where you're going and who you bring with you. You've brought so many people into the light, including yourself. The gas station is yours now. Do with it what you will. But my hope is that it remains a place where hungry people find food, where lost people find community, where the broken find healing. Keep feeding people. Keep showing up. Keep being the miracle. With all my love, Dorothy. The letter trembled in Flint's hands. Beside him, Ezra was crying silently, tears streaming down his face. She gave us everything, the boy whispered. Yeah, she did. They sat in that office for a long time, holding Dorothy's final gift, understanding the weight of what she'd entrusted to them. Not just property, but legacy. The responsibility to continue what they'd started, to honor her faith in them, to be worthy of her sacrifice. When they finally left, walking out into afternoon sunlight that felt too bright, too normal for a day that had changed everything, Ezra looked up at Flint. We can't let her down. No, we can't. What do we do? Flint thought about that, about a woman who'd spent her life savings to protect something fragile and important, about a community that had come together around a simple act of kindness, about a boy who'd started it all with nothing but his choice and a heart that refused to accept suffering as inevitable. We keep going, he said. We make Miller's everything she believed it could be, a real community center. Not just food distribution, but resources, job training, after-school programs, whatever people need. We build something that lasts. That's going to take a lot of work. Good thing we know how to work. Over the next 6 months, Miller's Gas and Go transformed. The pumps still operated that practical function, keeping the lights on. But the rest of the property became something else entirely. A community hub, a gathering place, a beacon for people who needed help and people who wanted to give it. They added a covered pavilion for the distribution center, protecting volunteers and families from weather. Built a small classroom where Walt taught basic mechanics and Sienna offered cooking classes. Created a play area for children whose parents were picking up food. Installed computers for job searches and resume building. Started a tool library where people could borrow equipment they couldn't afford to buy. Ezra was there for all of it. Every expansion, every new program, every decision about how to use Dorothy's gift. He'd grown quieter over the months, more thoughtful. The frenetic energy of early adolescence tempered by responsibility that aged him in ways both beautiful and heartbreaking. One Saturday, Flint found him sitting alone on the same curb, where everything had started, watching families move through the distribution center with that intense focus he sometimes got. You okay, kid? Ezra nodded, just thinking. About about how it almost didn't happen. If you hadn't stopped that day, if you hadn't asked me why, if Dorothy hadn't helped, if any of it had gone different, none of this would exist. Flint sat down beside him. But it did happen. All of it. That's what matters. I know, but it makes me think about all the other kids out there. The ones giving away their lunches where nobody's watching. The ones suffering alone. What about them? You can't save everyone, Ezra. We talked about this. I know, but I can tell the story. I can show other people what's possible. If one kid in one gas station can start this, imagine what could happen if everyone who saw suffering decided to do something about it. Flint looked at the boy, really looked at him, and saw not a child anymore, but someone becoming something else. A voice, a leader, a living example of what compassion could build when given room to grow. You're going to do great things, Flint said quietly. I already did. I gave Walt my sandwich. That was just the beginning. Maybe that's all any of us get, beginnings, and then we trust other people to continue them. The wisdom in those words coming from an 11-year-old struck Flint silent, because Ezra was right. None of them would live forever. Dorothy had proven that. But what they built, what they started, could outlive them all if they taught others to carry it forward. 18 months after Flint first saw a small boy give away his lunch, Miller's Community Center, as it was now officially known, held an open house. Local media covered it. State representatives attended. Even Kozlowski showed up, though he stood in the back and left early, his face unreadable. But the real guests, the ones who mattered, were the families. 167 of them now in various stages of crisis and recovery. Some had been coming since the beginning. Others had just discovered the center. All of them found something they needed: food, resources, community, hope. Ezra gave a speech because of course he did, but this one was different from the others. Shorter, simpler, more focused. A year and a half ago I was hungry, he said, standing on a makeshift stage in the pavilion. Today I'm not, but that's not the story. The story is what happened between those two things. The story is Mr. Flint stopping to ask a question. Dorothy believing in something bigger than herself. Walt choosing recovery. My mom accepting help. All of you showing up to give and receive and be part of something good. He paused, looking out at the crowd. I started this by giving away a sandwich, but you all turned it into something I never could have built alone. You prove that communities are stronger than individuals, that kindness is contagious, that we don't have to accept suffering as normal. His voice grew softer, but somehow carried farther. Dorothy left us this place, but really she left us a responsibility to keep showing up for each other, to keep seeing people who are invisible, to keep acting when action feels too small to matter. She believed we could do that. I believe it too. He stepped back from the microphone, and the applause that followed was different from other times, not celebratory but solemn, grateful, a collective acknowledgement of something sacred. Later, as the sun set and the crowd thinned, Flint and Ezra sat on the curb one last time. The same spot, the same posture, but everything else had changed. A young girl, maybe 9 years old, approached them. Her name was Maya, and she'd been coming to the center for 2 months with her single father. She clutched a folded lunch sack in her hands. Ezra, she said shyly, I saw you give food to someone once, to Mr. Walt, and it made me think I could do that too. So I've been bringing extra in my lunch, sharing with other kids at school who don't have enough. Is that okay? Ezra looked at the girl, at her earnest face and her paper sack and her desire to help, and Flint watched something shift in the boy's expression. Understanding. Recognition. The moment when you realize your story has become bigger than you, has taken on its own life, has planted seeds you will never see fully grow. That's more than okay, Ezra said gently. That's perfect. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to do. Maya smiled and ran back to her father. Flint and Ezra watched her go. She's going to do what I did, Ezra said quietly. Give away her lunch, make herself hungry to feed someone else. Probably, sir. Should we stop her? Can't stop kindness, kid. can only help it grow right. We'll make sure she has enough. Make sure she knows she doesn't have to choose, that there's another way. By showing her, the way you showed me. Yeah, by showing her. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled over Route 9. Inside the community center, lights blazed. People moved through the space, gathering food, sharing conversations, building connections that would sustain them through whatever came next. Flint thought about the long road that had brought him here. 30 years of riding with the Iron Reapers. 30 years of running from pain his mother's death had carved into him. 30 years of thinking strength meant hardness, protection meant distance, survival meant not caring too much about anything. And then a 10-year-old boy had given away his lunch, and everything Flint thought he knew about strength had shattered and reformed into something truer. You ever regret it? Ezra asked suddenly. Stopping that day, getting involved, all of this? Not for a second. Why pitamita? Flint considered the question. Before I met you, I was just riding, just existing, going through motions. I had my brothers had the club, but it was hollow somehow, like I was watching my own life from outside, not really living it. He gestured at the community center, at everything they'd built. This is real. This matters. You gave me that, gave me purpose beyond just surviving, taught me that the strength I spent 30 years building was meant for something more than intimidation, was meant for protection, for building, for caring about people. I didn't teach you anything, I just gave away my lunch. You taught me everything. You taught me that age doesn't matter when it comes to courage, that the smallest actions can have the biggest impacts, that asking why is sometimes more important than knowing how. You taught me to stop, to see, to care. Ezra leaned against Flint's shoulder, this boy who'd grown so much in 18 months, but was still just a kid, still needed support, still carried weight that sometimes threatened to crush him. I'm scared, Ezra admitted, of what comes next, of growing up, of not being able to do this anymore. Why wouldn't you be able to do this? Because eventually I'll have homework in sports, in college, in life. I can't volunteer here forever. No, but you can carry it with you, what you learned here, what you built, the understanding that one person caring makes a difference. You'll take that wherever you go, do whatever you do, and it'll ripple out in ways you can't predict. Like Maya. Like Maya, like the families who come here and then help others. Like Walt teaching kids mechanics. Like your mom's cafe hiring people who need second chances. Like the Iron Reapers learning that protection isn't just about muscle. It's all connected. All rippling out from one boy who decided feeding someone else mattered more than his own hunger. Ezra was quiet for a long moment. Then, do you think Dorothy knows that we kept going, that we didn't waste her gift? Yeah, kid, I think she knows. The first stars appeared overhead, pinpricks of light against the vast darkness. Somewhere down Route 9, a truck rumbled past its headlights, cutting through the night. The world kept turning indifferent to their small victories, their quiet triumphs, their daily choice to show up and care and build something good. But here in this space, they'd created the indifference couldn't reach. Here, people mattered. Suffering was answered with action. Hunger was met with food. Loneliness was countered with community. Here a boy had given away his lunch and changed everything. Flint stood, offered Ezra his hand, pulled him to his feet. Come on, your mom's waiting, and Walt wanted to show you something he's been working on. They walked toward the center together, the massive biker and the growing boy, their shadows stretching long behind them in the artificial light. Through the windows, Flint could see Sienna talking with volunteers, Walt demonstrating something to a group of teenagers, Booker and the other Reapers organizing next week's supplies. Family, not by blood but by choice, by shared purpose, by the understanding that they were all in this together, all responsible for each other, all committed to the simple, radical act of caring. Ezra stopped at the door, turned back to look at the curb where he used to sit with Walt, where everything began. His face was thoughtful, older than his years, carrying knowledge that most people spent lifetimes learning. You know what I think, he said. What's that? I think the last good thing you have is the first thing you should give. Because when you give it, it doesn't disappear. It multiplies. It becomes more. It becomes everything. Flint felt his throat tighten. Where'd you learn that? From a sandwich, from Walt, from you, from everyone who showed up when it mattered. Ezra smiled. From Dorothy, who gave us everything because she believed we'd do something good with it. And did we? The boy looked at the bustling center, at the people finding help, and offering it at the community that had grown from one small act of kindness into something sustainable and real and vital. Yeah, Ezra said softly. I think we did. They went inside together. The door closed behind them, but the light remained spilling out into the darkness of Route 9, a beacon for anyone who needed it. A promise that somewhere in this hard world people still cared, still showed up, still chose kindness even when it cost them something. And in the morning they'd do it again, because that's what community meant. Showing up, doing the work, trusting that small actions accumulated into lasting change. Believing that one person's courage could inspire thousands. Understanding that the measure of a life wasn't in grand gestures, but in daily choices to see suffering and respond with compassion. Ezra Cordell Hayes had taught them that. A boy who'd been hungry and chose to feed someone else anyway. Who'd been small and chose to stand tall. Who'd been scared and chose to be brave. 5 years passed. Ezra Cordell Hayes, 16 years old now, stood behind the counter at Miller's Community Center on a Saturday afternoon in late spring. Tall enough that he no longer needed to stretch for the microphone. Confident enough that speaking to crowds felt natural. Old enough to drive to work, a real job, to think about college applications and what came after high school. But every Saturday without fail, he was here. The distribution center served 200 families now. The model had spread to 3 neighboring counties, each one using Miller's as a template, adapting it to their communities, proving that what started with one boy's choice could be replicated anywhere people decided to care. Walt Calhoun had trained 47 students in mechanics over 5 years, 12 of whom had gone on to stable careers in automotive repair, construction, and industrial maintenance. Sienna's Cafe employed 6 people, all of them formerly homeless or in recovery, all of them given second chances that had transformed into new lives. And Maya, the 9-year-old girl with the lunch sack, now ran the youth volunteer program at 15, teaching younger kids the same lessons Ezra had taught her. The cycle continuing, the ripples spreading. Flint walked in grayer now at 53, moving a bit slower after a motorcycle accident 2 years back that had left him with a permanent limp, but still showing up every week. He and Ezra had developed a routine over 5 years. Didn't need many words anymore. Just presence. Just the understanding that came from weathering storms together and coming out the other side. How many today? Flint asked, leaning against the counter. 43 families. New record. Flint nodded, satisfied. Dorothy would be proud. Yeah, Ezra said, glancing at the photo of Dorothy they'd hung by the entrance, her kind face watching over everything they'd built in her name. She would. A young boy, maybe 10, approached the counter, thin, nervous, wearing clothes a size too big, holding something wrapped in aluminum foil with the careful precision of someone carrying something precious. Excuse me, the boy said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. I brought this for anyone who needs it. He held out what looked like a homemade sandwich, the foil crinkling in his trembling hands. Ezra felt time fold in on itself, saw himself 5 years ago, small, scared, giving away the only thing he had because it felt like the right thing, even when it cost him everything. He took the sandwich, gently held it like the gift it was. What's your name? Marcus. Marcus? I'm Ezra. He knelt down, Flint's gesture passed forward through the years, making himself small to meet a child's eyes. This is really kind, but I want you to know something important. You don't have to go hungry to help people. Not here, not anymore. That's what this place is for. The boy's eyes widened, confusion and hope warring on his young face. But how else can I help? I don't have money or anything. By showing up, by caring, by being exactly who you are. Ezra stood, gestured to the busy center, volunteers sorting donations, families selecting food, people talking and laughing and building connections. You see all this? It started because one kid decided feeding someone else mattered. Started with one sandwich, just like yours. But it grew because a whole community decided to carry it together. Nobody has to starve to help anymore. That's the lesson we learned. He held the sandwich out, offering it back. Keep this. Eat it. You need your strength. And if you want to help, come volunteer next Saturday. We'll teach you how to be part of something bigger than any one person. We'll show you what community means. Marcus took the sandwich back slowly, carefully, like he was receiving something holy. His eyes were bright with tears he was trying not to shed. I can really help, even though I'm just a kid. Especially because you're a kid, Ezra said. Kids see things adults miss sometimes. They care without calculating cost. They act before fear can stop them. Some of the best volunteers we've ever had were your age. They just needed someone to show them it was okay to care out loud. Marcus nodded, clutching his sandwich, and walked back toward his mother with something new in his eyes. Hope, purpose, the beginning of understanding that he mattered, that his compassion had value, that the world needed people exactly like him. Flint had watched the entire exchange from his spot by the counter. When Ezra turned back, the old biker was smiling that rare, full smile that transformed his weathered face. "You sound like me 5 years ago," Flint said. "Yeah, well, I learned from the best." They stood together at the window watching families come and go, watching volunteers sort donations with practiced efficiency, watching a community care for itself the way communities were always meant to, but so rarely managed to achieve. "Think it'll last?" Ezra asked, voicing the question that sometimes kept him awake at night. "After we're gone, after everyone who remembers how it started has moved on or passed away." Flint thought about Dorothy, about Tommy Smokey Davis, his brother who died on that rainy highway 5 years ago, about his mother Linda, dead 33 years, but still teaching him lessons through her absence, through the weight of what she'd sacrificed trying to give him a better life. About all the people who'd come and gone, leaving pieces of themselves behind, shaping the world through their choices and their sacrifices. "It'll last," he said, with the certainty of someone who'd watched it grow from nothing, "as long as there's one person who remembers why it matters. One kid willing to give away their lunch. One stranger willing to stop and ask why instead of just walking past. One community member willing to believe that small actions add up to something that changes everything." He put a hand on Ezra's shoulder, the gesture familiar now, almost paternal. "And you've made sure there'll always be someone who remembers. You've trained Maya. She's training others. Marcus will probably be here next Saturday, and he'll learn and he'll teach someone else. That's how it works. That's how good things survive. Not through one person carrying everything, but through each person carrying their piece and passing the knowledge forward." Outside, the sun set over Route 9, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold and deep purple that looked almost artificial in their beauty. The same road where everything had started. The same gas station where a massive biker had stopped for coffee and witnessed something that changed his life. The same curb where a small boy had made the choice that set everything in motion. But nothing was the same, and everything was better. Ezra locked the doors at 8 o'clock. Last volunteer gone, the last family helped, the center quiet now in the way that spaces get when good work has been done and people have gone home satisfied. He stood for a moment on that curb looking at the spot where he used to sit with Walt, where he used to hand over his lunch and try not to cry from hunger and fear, and the overwhelming weight of trying to save someone when you couldn't even save yourself. Somewhere in the county, a child was going to bed hungry tonight. Somewhere a parent was working 3 jobs and still falling short of making ends meet. Somewhere someone was giving up, losing hope, deciding that the world was too hard and they were too small to make any difference. But also somewhere someone was stopping to ask why. Someone was offering help without judgment. Someone was choosing kindness even when it cost them something. Someone was deciding that their comfort mattered less than someone else's survival. The ripples spread. La Reina. The light grew, the movement continued. And it all started here with a boyish sandwich, in the simple radical belief that one person's compassion could change the world. Ezra walked to his car, a used Honda he'd bought with money from his part-time job at the center. Money Flynn insisted he take, even though Ezra had argued he should volunteer without pay. Tomorrow he'd write his college essay. The prompt was simple but loaded with possibility. Describe a moment that changed your life. He already knew what he'd write about. A lunch sack, a man named Walt, a biker named Flint, a woman named Dorothy who believed so much in what they were building that she gave them everything she had. And the day he learned that the last good thing you have is always the first thing you should give. Because when you give it, it doesn't disappear. It multiplies. It becomes everything.